And we're live. So I already tagged both of you guys in so we can have this conversation. We'll do a little bit of banner so we can let the people, come in. If you're watching, please like and share this and do all that good stuff. We're on YouTube, and last time YouTube actually got a good amount of play. I never watch lives on YouTube. Do y'all?
Sometimes
Either. No.
I do on Sunday. Sometimes.
But wait, do you do YouTube from your TV?
No.
See, I don't either. Like, but I see people who are like totally watching lives like in their living room. I think it's so cute, and I can do it and I know how, but I just never do it. I watch things after on YouTube, but like live, I don't know. I'll get us together at some point. So if you're watching, I'm going to ask that you like this and that you share this and that you tell all your friends about it and that you tag your children's minister, your pastor, parents in your church. Maybe we can help get some of the heat off of you as a children's pastor, because sometimes parents and pastors have expectations that may not be, como se dice, realistic and nice, okay? Or they may just kind of either want something that they've seen at school, which ministry to children is different in school than it is in church, and it should be. And maybe they have some unrealistic, like supernova type expectations, and maybe we can help them to just understand what's happening in the world, and what the trends are in children's ministry, so you can get some of the heat off your back. So y'all are coming in. Thank you for sharing. Y'all are just amazing. I said, will you share this? And I just see the shares coming. Glory be to God. So I am super excited. Really? Can I tell y'all something? I saw a video of Evangelist Joyce Rogers playing the tambourine, and I just want to pick up one. Can we just say that she's just so amazing? And I'm not even a funeral person. Do you know I watched her funeral one more time?
Yeah.
Kind of
like
hard.
Again?
I did. It was hard for me to imagine she was gone. Like, I just still have a hard time, because I remember at one point being a woman in ministry, I knew like three. It was Jackie McCullough, Joyce Rogers, and maybe like Shirley Caesar. Like, that was probably all I knew at some point. And like, I'm for real, like, as far as somebody, and I did know one woman pastor when I was growing up, and I remember I only heard her one time, and I still remember the sermon title, "Your Bad Ain't Bad." I still remember that to this day. She was my cousin's aunt. But like, when you saw women doing it, other than literally that one person, like those are the only three women I knew. At some point, I was probably very young, but at some point that was all I ever saw, And so, man, Evangelist Rogers, I mean, you can't be a X, Y, and a little bit of Z and never heard her. Definitely right. Kojic Church, but if you were like Pentecostal adjacent, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
She is there. And Riri is very Pentecostal.
Oh, she is. All right.
Don't even try. She might be at a Baptist church, but Riri is very Pentecostal. She probably has a long black skirt right now that goes to her ankles. Okay, not anymore. But I was on TikTok real quick, and I saw this young girl. She had this white girl was on TikTok, and she had on a jean skirt like back in the day with the seam down the middle, that thick seam down the middle. And she played shout music, and her hashtag was "White Girls Can Shout Too." This girl shouted to show him she could shout so much until it got real to her. Her face got red, and she was like, "And I was like, she is Assemblies of God." Like, she's definitely Pentecostal.
You've got to send me that.
Oh, I'll totally
that. I need that.
I will. Like, she was just doing that first, and I mean, she had it. Then she could do the dip and everything, and then her face got red, and like then it just hit her, and she was just like, I was like, oh, I can't do this on TikTok.
But where she get the jean skirt though with the seam? Where you get that?
It has to be passed down.
Had to.
Yeah. Oh, they've had that. It's been in the family.
It had to. I mean, it was that thick seam. Remember that thick seam? Like, it was like wide in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Like straight. You know what I mean? Like, it was bad.
Yeah, that's circa like 1982. Like,
totally. and when you wore that was your dress down. Like, you was, you know what I'm saying? Like, you was like lit in the church when you had on a denim skirt, because you were like in your regular dress. That was like And they're probably gonna be playing like a Kirk Franklin song that you're gonna sing to in the choir because it was like the lit day for the young people.
Yeah, girl. Yeah, bring us back.
With white kids on, with some kids on. You have
Totally
on, like,
kids.
white
and then we upgraded to K-Swiss.
Yes.
Yep. I'm trying to tell. Listen. I know these days. So speaking of back in the day, again, if you would just like and share, we want to talk about children's ministry. It is my webinar for the month, but I do have to bring in reinforcement because I haven't done children's ministry and I can only talk about the trends, kind of what the statistics are saying. And we have to look at the statistics from the top down because we're not able to research children. So we kind of have to look at what people are saying about that time in their life. So of course, I'm the lead researcher on the State of the Black Church study, and I am excited about what you guys will see. It's going to come out. We'll have pre-sales next week, I think it is, on the 16th or something like that. And then it'll be available in digital form, I believe, at the beginning of July. And then about 2 weeks later in print. And so we're really excited. And I'm really excited with some of the stuff that you can find out from this study. But I really want to do children's ministry and not ignore it, even though it's not, what I spent time in. I've only been able to look at data and things. The reason I couldn't skip it was because I am prepared to write my next book, and she's the GOAT of ministry. I don't know if you see in the comments I talk about you, Keish.
Oh,
but it was really important because I think I'm willing to hang my hat on life stage ministry being the next phase of successful ministry. And it's really because I know based on the data, and of course, it's unpublished, I can't tell you numbers. When people look back at their most successful stages of life in ministry, it is children's ministry and youth ministry and young adult, and then it kind of drops off, right? And we didn't ask them about children's ministry, youth ministry. We're talking about like times in your life, and it kept going back to these stages. And I think it's clearly because there was clear and direct programming for these times in your life. And I think we get caught up in a number of things that we'll discuss. And we stop programming for people when they are older. And I think it's really important that we program for those stages in life. Like I remember reading, and I was about 20 something. I started reading Quarter Life Crisis because at the time when life should be great, you're graduating and life should be good. Life seemed like it was falling apart. It sucked, right? And there was no life stage ministry. When we also talked to parents in another survey we did, this was separate from State of the Black Church. Parents appreciated ministry most, either, children, youth, or when their children had programming. That's when they were locked in. So when their children were locked in, they were locked in, even if there wasn't programming for them. And I think both of y'all can probably agree to this, but I'm totally open to pushback. The programming for adults is when your child is in one of those ministries. You either become a volunteer or you have like time away with the other parents, when they're doing stuff, and your programming becomes parenting children and youth with other parents.
Yeah. I mean, I've always said, because I've been children pastor, youth pastor, young adult pastor, campus pastor, senior pastor, if you want to grow your church, grow your children's ministry.
Absolutely.
Like that's where you start. Like it's, if you have a vibrant, healthy children's ministry, that's how you lock in parents and adults.
Absolutely.
Because for a lot of parents who are looking at churches, that's what they're looking at first. They want to make sure that there's somewhere where their kids can grow and worship and have fun, because that's a big part of it too.
It is.
And once they know their kids can be locked in, then as parents, they can, consider it as a possibility. But if you don't have a vibrant children's ministry, it's going to be hard for you to grow.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think some people know this, right? And they have these conversations, but they don't put any money into it. So I'm like, so you don't know it. You know what I mean? Because to know it is to fund it.
Yeah.
If you can say whatever you want to, you can put an emphasis. We want to get the children, as they say from the book. We want to get the children, we want to get the young people. But then if there's no money except the pizza budget, you know what I mean? Then you really don't want children. And I think we're getting to the point now where I think people feel like the whole family element is lost, but the family element is lost in a church when the children's ministry is not funded. You know what I'm saying? Like, how are you a family church when you don't have anything for children? You know what I'm saying? Like, but tell me this: when was the last time y'all saw a church that literally did life stage programming well, like through adulthood?
You said do it well. That's what you said.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay,
right. So when was the last time we saw a well-funded children's ministry?
I'll speak for our church. I think we do. What my pastor realized early on was that they were going to have to make an investment. And I think when pastors have children in children's ministry,
about to say that. Mm-hmm.
It definitely makes a difference. Or if the senior pastor was very intimately involved in children's ministry as they came up the ranks, not necessarily being pushed into it, but actually had a heart and an affinity for it, then you see the need for the investment. But early on, my pastor saw the need, and it wasn't just a need for pizza, and it wasn't just a need for skate nights. It was a need for the proper person to help create the right programming. So he was willing to make the investment in having the right person. So because of that, we have I've been here now almost 10 years, and we've always had a full-time or a part-time person dedicated to children's ministry.
Very true.
Because we realize that there has to be a person. It can't just be a volunteer. It has to be a person.
Yeah, y'all have. Really quickly, dang it was a couple things you said, but I realized I didn't even introduce y'all. Like, dang, nobody even, when you said something, I'm like, they don't know where Reed's from. So I want y'all to know these are two people I love and know well, like both of them, who are like important parts of my life, and like both of them could come live with me if they need like that kind of love, right? Like the Parker household would be open. And so we have Reverend Dr. Lakeisha Cook, who I'll let her tell you a little bit about herself today. But what I want you guys to know is the way I know that she does this well is because when I was growing up, there was this hotshot pastor who came in. She was cute and tiny and chocolate, and she was an amazing preacher. Like, I remember her first sermon at the church that I was at when she was candidating, which I don't think we even understood a lot about what was happening at that point. Not candidating because you were, but when she was doing her interview process. And then she came in, and she was not my children's pastor. I was in college. Okay.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you.
But she was a children, youth, and young adult pastor, but it was a little different for her. She didn't have kids yet. And I remember her being so committed though, because we had Acts. Remember, I volunteered with Acts.
Yeah.
And you were almost like a children's parent, like a soccer mom with the rest of the ministry moms. You were a ministry mom without being a mom yet, because Jonathan wasn't in your life yet. And so I just saw all forms of those ministries when you did it. Let me also stop and say, I do not think people, and this is just me being me, okay, separate that from both of my friends. I don't think anyone should have a children, youth, and young adult ministry. Like,
say it one more time. One more.
No one should have a children, youth, and young adult ministry. Not and go and tell people that you're doing these things well. Because what you're doing is overwhelming people to the point that they're not ever going to legitimately feel successful, because you just cannot successfully do all three ministries. The best you can do is have a great team, which I remember times, and it may have waned after a time because, what's happening in big church impacts your volunteers, And so, which I hate the word big church, but I remember a time we had like really, really strong volunteers, and that was especially in the early days with Acts and all those things. But let me just say this one more time. You cannot have a children, youth, and young adult ministry and feel like you're actually attending to the needs of either one of those groups well. And usually a person does one well, like really, really well, because that's their real thing. And then they do the others because you want them to. So that's Reverend Dr. Cook. And then Reverend Johnson is my great friend. We met each other when we were both entrepreneurs. figuring out what we were going to do with ministry, but she actually returned to ministry. And let me say this, because she was so amazing at her job. Like literally, she couldn't go visit without people wanting her back. And so it was kind of like, what do we need to do? And I think that's a real testament to who she is in her ministry. And as a person, both of these women are amazing. They helped me through all times in my life. I can always pick up the phone and talk to either one of them. And when I don't want to talk to anybody, these are two people I still pick up the phone for, because I don't have to change anything or fake anything. I also want to say, when it comes to this discussion, I tried to find a male. And let's talk about the fact that they don't choose men for children's ministry. Because children's ministry is not a stepping stone to being a pastor for like as far as people's perceptions go, right? They don't perceive that you go from children's pastor, to being a senior pastor. Why? Because in our world, the youth pastor is the position that you do and you conquer and you practice on the youth so that you can become a senior pastor, which is why you see men in those roles, but you do not see very many men as children. Like, it is very rare. I wish we did the numbers. I'm sure we can do the numbers on the positions that people have and kind of mine that data, but I couldn't searched all over.
Couldn't find nobody.
Hello.
But Bree, to that point, I would also like to say that a lot of times, even in suburban churches, like in the area where I'm at, it's people feel safer to have a woman. They feel like, oh, we're not going to put a man in this position for children because there's this, we think it's safer to have a woman handling the smaller children than to have a man. Not that a man would be qualified. Now, we do know that there is the issue of it's not the stepping stone, but then there are some churches who would not choose a man even if they desired that position, because it gives this appearance of some, woman is safer with our smaller children.
Dang, that's wild. I didn't even think about that. That's and okay. So here's the thing: how do you choose a man to handle that huge budget, to be responsible for literally everybody else, and the same man that you think is uncomfortable with your babies, you give them your soul. You know what I'm saying? Not technically, but I think parishioners feel like that, right? You're responsible for guiding me in such strong ways, but not the children. That's dangerous.
Because it's a gender stereotype.
It is.
Woman as nurturer, woman as, taking care of the children. So it becomes the natural that a woman needs to be over the children's ministry. Yeah. So, it's another way that we box people in with these gender norms.
Yeah. Totally. My daddy wants me to know Daddy's watching you. Hey, Daddy. Thank you so much for watching me.
Hey, Dad. Hey, Dad.
Hey, Dad.
And so I just think it's weird when we talk about gender and the way that, how we trust. But Ree, you were talking about if you have a child or whatever, you think about it differently, or if you had any type of training, like in that area, if that was like where your heart was. Tell me this, do y'all think it is difficult for a single pastor or a pastor who doesn't have children to understand the value of it?
To understand the value of children's ministry? I do. I don't think it's impossible, but I think it's a lot more difficult, especially depending on the type of church that he feels he's called to build, right? So if his claim to fame is, I get all these younger adults or these millennials and they follow me, he's not going to think much about children's ministry unless that's the driving force for the church. So his church, so he get planted in a church where there are families, and those are the money people, the people who speak for the church, then it becomes a priority. But if there's no, from what I've seen, when there's not a real connection, there's not a real investment or desire for investment. It may be said, but that's not where the money is being pushed and put.
Yeah, I think until you have a child too, it's hard to know sometimes how much money even goes into raising one to even imagine that the church's budget should, match it or, in any kind of way. I mean, I tell people all the time, if you can get through the poverty of raising a child when they're younger, you got this. You know what I'm saying? Like, because it will put you in poverty, it's a lot. Like, I remember childcare. Remember we had Breonna and Briera, remember? And that childcare,
yeah,
I could have bought 2 Louis a month. At least.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When you look at what, but I think that's kind of how ministries develop into strong ministries, is to know what parents are going through, and then to also know what children need. Now, tell me what you guys think about this. A lot of times when people are doing ministry and they're looking for volunteers, they choose people who naturally, or not naturally, who professionally work with the demographic they're working with. So what do y'all feel about this whole, like, oh, we're working with children, let's recruit teachers, let's recruit childcare workers?
Well, I will say in my experience
Mm-hmm.
that some of the best volunteers that I've had
Mm-hmm.
in their professional lives, they were teachers or educators or childcare providers.
Okay.
Now, that's not all of my best volunteers, but some of the ones that pop in my mind. Like, let's go back to the church where we connected.
Okay.
One of our main people who was in Promised Land in Children's Church, she is still working in the school system, and she was the pastor. It was 3 of them, but she was like the lead, and she was school-based, and it flowed out of her body. Like, it just...
Natalie?
No. Well, Nat was also a school person.
I thought you were going to say, yep.
She was over Acts. Natalie Knight, love her. Sis, I know you're not on Facebook, but I'm shouting you out. Like, so that was who she was in her professional life, and it naturally spilled over. So I'm going to go ahead and call the name, Alana Ragland. Like, she was the Promised Land pastor for Children's Church. True. She's a principal. Now she's working district level. Like, it is in her.
But she may have been called, though, to children. She was good at it. Like,
right. But that's why I'm thinking back of my own experience and those like star people who just lived and breathed children ministry.
Yeah.
And they were the ones that lived and breathed children. And so a lot of times in their professional lives, they would do it. Now, what I would never do is recruit teachers intentionally, because some teachers don't want to be bothered with kids.
Right.
They don't want
to work.
Yeah, they don't want to. And so but for those who naturally are like, well, no, this is my gift set and I want to come. Hey, come on. And I'm telling you, and I've in some recent years, some of my rock stars were educators.
I think it's a skill that we forget.
That's actually the only way.
No, go ahead, Ree.
No, I was just going to say that's the only way that we've been able to have teachers to serve in children's ministry is if they come on their own. When trying to recruit, we're like, if you work at the school, if you whatever, all of those teachers are like,
you're like, no.
But when you get those who come,
let me leave.
They run and they're like, no. They don't want you to know what they do. They don't want you to no, because they're like, I don't want to be bothered with kids. But when we get those educators who come to serve in children's ministry or youth ministry, we know that they feel that they're called to it. And then they are stellar at what they do. They bring so much life to the entire program. But we're not. But when we try to recruit them and we say, if you're a teacher, they're like, So it's the difference than being called and then just begging people.
Yeah, and that begging don't work. I get to see in the comments, we get to see Curtis Bryant says he did children's ministry for 2 years, and to our point, he couldn't find any male children's ministry peers. But if you're in youth ministry, you'd go to like the youth ministers lunch, and they do all this stuff together, and all of them, most of them are men. And Ree, you've been in youth ministry too, so and Keish, you've been in, so I know y'all have seen that. It's like the good old boys club, like the young good old boys club is right there in youth ministry. We got to see a couple of things when we did data on Black millennials and faith, and we got to see one ministry that millennials hated to do was youth ministry, because they felt like they couldn't grow out of it if they did it. Like there was the proximity. They were too close to it. If they went back to it, they were probably going to be treated like youth, you know what I mean? More than the actual workers. I wanted to know, as far as that demographic goes, do you see that a lot of young adults are even willing to do children's ministry, or does there seem to be kind of like a age group above that young adult age?
Well, my experience is, yes, millennials don't want to do children's ministry or youth ministry, more youth ministry. Some of them will do children, especially if now they have a child. If, now they have a small child, they'll do it because sometimes the children's program may require or ask parents, give us a Sunday, give us, whatever. So they will sometimes, because I have to bring my child or I want to ensure that there's some proper things happening. But definitely youth ministry, they always feel like we're too close. And I just think they still have, sometimes I'm gonna be a millennial right quick. We still have so much party in us, right? And like when they start playing that good music, we be wanting to party, and then we forget that. No, but a lot of time, and then if they don't have kids, they don't want to play with other people's kids because it's like childcare, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah. That proximity thing is real. If you're watching, don't forget to like, share, tag your friends, your pastor, your cousin, your nephew, and them. I do see that whole age group, like when you go into children's ministry, you can find teenagers who are willing to help. And then when they become adults, it's like, like Heisman, I don't want to do that, And I wonder what that's about. I have a couple of assumptions, but I won't. I think there is a fixation a little more when you're a teenager not to have a baby, but it's almost like playing with dolls, right? You like kids, you can play with kids, you think about kids, like almost it's just right out of the doll phase. So it's not dolls, it's real kids. I think when you're a young adult, that phase is like, it's like close to reality. Like I can actually have a child, no more playing, you know what I mean? Like no more dolls. It seems like that whole like playtime kind of thing changes. And I literally watched young people at my churches, like growing up, when they loved being around kids. And as soon as they would age out of youth ministry, I don't know if it came too close to them having their own. And it wasn't that they didn't have time because they did other ministry. But I wonder, y'all can tell me in the chat what you think it is. I wonder what it is that changes. It's odd. It's like
I never had even really thought about it, but now as I'm thinking back, again, teenagers, super easy, especially get them to work with the younger kids. They all own it. Like, I'll be in the toddler room. Oh yes, I'll work in the nursery and the infants, like all day. But then once they get to college, like they disappear. Like,
seriously
anymore. And when I think of like the average age of like children workers that I've had the pleasure of working with, it's not like 20-year-olds, like it is 30 up.
Yeah.
So I had never even thought about the fact that age demographic really is missing when it comes to serving in that particular area of ministry.
And then I wonder, somebody was saying working from a place of burnout, and that could be very true too. Like you had to be at church. So if I had to choose a place, you know what I mean? I want to do this, but I'm about to detox from the church. You know what I mean? Like don't be calling me.
Right.
I wonder if that's, part of what is happening when they walk away. And somebody said, what I've experienced most is personality clash between young adults and older teachers. I experienced that. Older teachers who want to do things one way without even trying something new. Now, I'm going to tell you this. When I was at the church we connected at, nobody gave me more grief. Nobody in the world, other than some of those youth and children's workers. They were very territorial, and I don't feel like they treated each other like that, but they definitely treated younger people like that. Like you can't bring nothing to the table, kind of, you know what I mean? Like you do this. And it was always like kitty. So I understand it now. It was kitty task, you know what I mean? Like, or the stuff they didn't want to do. And I remember probably like one of my first big clashes was with the parent. And like church, like that church hurt stuff. One of them was with the parent, and she was helping you. And I don't know her issue. She's nuts anyway. I know
who you're talking about. Don't worry, I got you.
So, but I do remember that, and that's sad that that's the first time you have like the bad encounter. It's with two people supposed to be trying to do the same thing with the same goal. So I totally get that. Yeah, and.
I was going to say, I remember now, imagine I was 25, like coming in as a children, youth, and young adult minister. And so I had a lot of older volunteers who were working at that particular time. So they gave you grief? Let me tell you something.
I'm sure.
They wore me out. I remember one time in particular, and I'm not going to be on my therapist's couch right now, but I remember one time in particular, I showed Charlie Brown's Christmas. like for a Bible study. Like
Uh-huh.
it was in big church. Like it wasn't for the kids. I used Linus because Linus got his preach on. And
Yeah.
I just thought it was just a great illustration. Just use video and let's talk about the Christmas story. Girl, they wore me out afterwards. And they were like, you let her show that in church. That ain't Christ-like and blah. I was like, oh, I thought I was being creative. Lord, let me take my creativity and go on back home.
Well, I mean, they were being creative by pretending like they were super holy. That was creative. That was a good narrative.
So
right.
So Snoopy can't teach you about being saved. Really?
Right.
We can't learn nothing from Linus and his blanket. Really? That's what we doing? I remember it though. So maybe that whoever put that comment in the chat might be onto something. The older adults may be the ones that are driving some of our young adults away from not even wanting to be involved in helping with the children.
That's wild.
Girl.
Okay.
Come on, write the book, Bree. Write the book.
I'm starting to think that this whole thing about young adults also not wanting to participate in like youth and children's ministry probably creates a greater distance when it comes to mentoring. You know what I mean? Like I think we wait so long to mentor. We don't know how, we don't have the connection. We don't feel called to it, the same. But I think if it started much younger, if you were already doing this, because that's like mentoring, right? To help with those age groups when you're just out of it. And I'm assuming if you stop for a whole decade, it would create such a distance that you don't actually go back and help, the sibling, So when it comes to children's ministry, how important is it to really have total church buy-in for the success of the ministry? Like to understand what you really do aside from being a babysitter like most people feel.
I think it's important that the entire church is bought in and it's explained, not just when we need volunteers, but people get a real understanding that there's real programming that's life-changing. And you do that in a number of ways by getting children to express how they're being helped, or parents to express how children are being helped, finding ways to measure that. Because when people don't, they just think it's babysitting. So you get those millennials or younger adults who don't want to babysit. They don't want to do childcare. They don't want to be away from big church. They don't want to miss the revival. Because they have not been shown the value of doing ministry in this way. Because what happens most of the time in a lot of churches, big and small, children's ministry get lumped in as the babysitting, childcare. We only, we give them some snacks, and it's not that they're growing. It's not that we're able to see what children are learning. It's not that we're holding this area of ministry in any sort of accountability to make sure our kids are learning books of the Bible, kids are being changed, and parents are aware of what's going on. Most parents don't know what's happening in children's church. Kids get in the car and they say, I don't know. So the parent is disconnected. The pastor is disconnected. They can't even share vision about the church, about children's ministry. So nobody else wants to go back there.
Well, you said, say, I don't know. That's assuming there's a question being asked. And I am actually under the assumption that we don't ask enough questions. When we did our initial research on Black millennials and faith, we ended up creating a group. Well, because it was just me at that point. I ended up creating a group called The Fugitive. And it was a group of Black millennials who went to church, honored church, respected people, did all of their, knew their books of the Bible, you know what I mean? Did all their Easter speeches, went to all the lock-ins, but they never really believed in Christ. And so when they became young adults and they went to college and they came back home, they were like, oh, we got to get them back in church. But they didn't have to get them back in the church. They actually had to evangelize. Like they had to sell them on Jesus, and they had been there 18 years of their life, only gone for 4, you know what I mean? And they really did not imagine that these people hadn't bought into Christ. And I remember, so I did an in-depth interview with one of them, and I have a question based on this. And I said, like, how did you feel like when you finally told your parents? She said, oh, I didn't tell my parents, somebody else did. It felt like a coming out experience because I told somebody else I wasn't a Christian, and they went back and told my family, and my family said, don't tell anybody. because we don't want the rest of the family to know that you're not a believer. And I said, well, how did you get through that many years? And your family not know? And she said, well, they didn't ask. And I said, huh? She said, they didn't ask. And I said, well, were you asking questions, along the way? And she said, yeah. She said, the more I asked my youth pastor and senior pastor questions, the more I was sure I did not believe. And I said, it's because they couldn't answer. They gave me fluff answers. She said, no, I just literally didn't believe what they were saying. It didn't make sense to me. And so I said to her, because I'm just thinking unfortunately, I'm just thinking this church hurt. You know what I mean? Like she all right. And because, you look at numbers first, you don't hear from people initially. And so she said to me, I said to her, tell me, what's your biggest issue with God? If you had to have one issue with God, what would that issue be? And she said, an issue? She said, it's like having an issue with a tooth fairy. God doesn't exist. That's when I realized she really wasn't a believer, because you don't have a bone to pick. Because in your mind, you don't have a bone to pick with an invisible, imaginary character. So I wonder what would have happened if her parents would have been asking her when she got in the car or on their way to the car at the dinner table, hey, what did you talk about? Oh, Jonah being swallowed by a fish. Oh, what did you think about that? Jonah can't can't no fish swallow no person. You know what I mean? So now they're telling us fairy tales. No, babe, it's not a fairy tale. It's, I just wonder what would have happened if they were having conversations. And so my question to you is, how important is it that there is a theme or a system between the messaging in all life stages? So should the children learn somewhat of at least on some scale, what's being taught in church with adults? Should children learn what youth are learning at some level so they can have these conversations at home? Because I must imagine it is intimidating for a parent to try to teach on something that they may not have even heard yet or may not understand well. How important is it that there's some type of streamlined messaging happening?
I have so much to say. So maybe I'll let Cherie jump, because I have so much.
Cherie, go.
Okay, so I think there's a couple of things. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna start with what is forefront on the front of my mind, and then I'm gonna jump to your question.
Okay.
So I think one of the issues that we have is there is not an effective way in which we measure success for ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So even the pastors who will put the money behind children and youth ministries and they'll resource it, I think that there are a lot of times where money is put there and then children and youth are just doing stuff over there, and we know it's happening. We may check numbers and attendance, but we really don't know what's going on. Like, we just don't. Like, and I'm going to speak from self. Like, you are so caught up in everything else that's happening in order to make church. Mm-hmm. Are we really paying attention and finding out what's really going on?
Yeah.
On Sundays, what's really going on in Bible studies? What are we really teaching on? Because in schools, and I know we don't want to compare K-12 to church, but there's a clear curriculum map. We've got milestones that we want kids to hit at a certain time, mm-hmm. and we're able to say, okay, we know that you're growing and developing because you're able to do these things. Are we applying that same principle when it comes to what we're teaching our children? And that's why you have kids who have been in church forever, and then they get to be young adults and they don't know no foundations of faith. They don't know anything about church, because nobody's ever bothered even to see what exactly is happening, what's really going on. So I think there's that. And now I forgot your question, because I was just so caught up in like that part, because it really burns me, like, because I think that that's where we're failing on some level, that we need to be more intentional. And I think, I remember the question now. I think when it comes to curriculum that has a consistent theme that goes from children, youth, young adults, that's the gap.
Okay.
Especially if you're looking at it from a cultural pace that's culturally sensitive and going to speak to Black people issues. Mm-hmm. I have researched, we have done a lot of work trying to figure out, is there something that can go from K-12, young adult, where we can all kind of be doing the same thing at the same time? It's not really there. So then that means you need to have children's pastor, youth pastor, senior pastor who are planning together.
Yeah.
And say, okay, this is what the calendar is going to look like, and here's some things that we want to kind of work on. And that's heavy lifting. I'm not saying it's impossible,
Yeah.
but it becomes very hard.
Yeah.
But I could see the potential and how it would be helpful for families to be able to all get in the car. I've got a teenager, a 5-year-old, and I got mom, and we're able to say we all kind of talked about the same things in the different places that we were, and now we can have a family dialogue about it.
Yeah.
So we just need to write the curriculum. Okay.
And now I feel convicted because I totally have young adult curriculum, and I never thought about employing someone to do it, you know what I mean, at every stage. So that means beyond young adults, because we do it like a little digital introduction, you know, that like leads into it in a way that is relevant for young adults. And I never thought about it, you know, like doing that on different levels. And it's probably important, especially if I'm writing a book on life stage ministry. Huh?
Yeah.
You know, but that's kind of, it's kind of wild because it seems so obvious, you know, that you just shouldn't have disjointed ministry and messaging, you know, happening. But I don't imagine in many Black churches. And I'm talking about sitting, I done sat in worship planning 2 hours a week, every single week. And what we did not do was plan for the message to match. I mean, to a certain extent, like what y'all doing? Oh, we doing this and that. We want to make sure they were doing something good, right? But I don't remember many times when, I mean, I'm sure some would say, oh, no, we did. Because there were times when we were all like on the same page, but it was like big times, not consistent training. And even if you preach about it in your church, was that happening in Bible study? You know what I mean? Like we were able to cement it.
Right. So there's a space and there's a need for it. Because again, you see some glimpses of it with some of the stuff that some of our white counterparts are producing. Mm-hmm. But when it comes from that culturally sensitive space that speaks to Black voices, Black needs, Black culture and community, it's not there. And so there's a space for us to write. I'm going to say us, because I'm putting myself in it now, Bree.
Come on, let's do it. Let's make it happen.
I agree totally. There's a space for it to be done, and it has to be simple. What I've learned and noticed when I try to look for, when I've in the past looked for curriculum, I found some stuff that could touch various generations, something that would, there's a curriculum out there. I don't endorse anybody because nobody's paying me for it, but there's curriculum out there that will address children's ministry, you know, teens and young adults. And it's one curriculum that you can purchase, but it's so cumbersome. It's so complicated to use. One, it's not for our culture. So then we have to work so hard to kind of make it match. So now,
which is then not worth
my start. Right, it's not even worth it, because by the time my star teacher, who's not an educator by trade, who's just good at what they do, have to go through this to try to find something worth teaching for those 20 minutes that they have the full attention of a child. It's not even worth it. So I do think it's important that we create what we need for our children and something that will go. I think a part of your question was, should some of that curriculum match, or should, you know, if we're learning it in children's ministry, should that be something? I think it's important, and it's important to keep the parents involved and make sure parents understand that this is not daycare. This is ministry. So I'm going to give you what you need, even if you don't know. Because what I found is there have been times where parents have felt intimidated because they don't know the Bible. So you get a parent who's new in the faith, and my child is in here learning from a theologian in children's ministry or in youth ministry, and then they get in the car and they're like, "Mama," because the reason why, and the mama's like, sit down. So you have to remember that you're talking to the entire family. So like resourcing that mama with the information she needs to ask questions or to have information. I think it's important that it all goes together so that everyone is growing, and that everyone in the family sees that this is not babysitting. This is ministry, and we're trying to grow your child so that they can be successful in their Christian journey.
Yeah, we're going to look at a couple questions in these comments, and I have another one that came to my phone. But before we move to that, I just want to be honest and say, do you really think pastors are going to veer from what they want to preach to make this align, And then two, if I'm honest, I don't know that on Sunday mornings we teach the Bible often in a way that equips a parent to have these conversations with their children and their youth and their young adults. So I would imagine that would change the behavioral aim and the aim of this sermon, right? So it could no longer be some of the thinner sermons that are just to shout you, with alliterations. You would have to get to the point where you're teaching with greater depth. And I think some pastors may not want that challenge. And I just want to be honest, and this is not shade. Some wouldn't be able to take the task on. That's just not what they think is preaching. And it may just be, it may be just intimidating as when you ask the parents, certain things about certain stories. And so I'll leave that alone because I don't want to offend the man, woman of God. Woman of God, you're doing a great job, Pastor. And I think pastors are doing a great job, but let's just be honest. If we're going to do that and prepare them in Sunday worship to have a conversation to match what's happening, we would have to change what preaching looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Like for many.
Yeah. And I automatically, as you were talking, it's the senior pastor would probably be the person who drives.
Absolutely.
They're in the driver's seat. So they would say, these are the themes.
Absolutely.
Y'all figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
and some themes don't match children's ministry well, and right. Even if they give you the theme, if they're going to use that theme and shout them, and you're going to use that theme and grow them, those are two different messages.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I did have a question that said, how do you, I don't remember exactly, but it was something like, how do you help children to understand the difference of a dramatic Bible story versus a fairy tale? Like Jonah and the Whale is dramatic. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of far out. And what's another children's story? We have children's stories that are like, really? You know what I mean? So how do you help children early on to understand the difference in a Bible story versus a fairy tale?
We're gonna let Pastor answer.
Okay. So I think that it starts with teaching a foundation about what is the Bible, how do we view God's word, what does God's word contain? Like you've got to build that foundation first so that there's an understanding as much as it can be on a developmental level about, how God's word was put together and how it was written and what do these stories teach us? And so once you have that foundation laid, then as you start teaching the Bible stories, it flows in a different way so that hopefully they're able to make that, they're able to differentiate between God's word and what they watch on the Disney Channel.
Yeah.
Cherie, please help if you have something.
I actually agree. And we have to make sure that we're not focusing on the dramatic part of the story. Like, although for a child, that may be the part that may get their attention, we have to make sure that there's always an understanding of what you're supposed to gain from this. Mm-hmm. Being afraid of a fish is not what you're supposed to gain. So like I've seen lessons where like there's a big idea, and especially for smaller kids, that's the part that we're going to repeat over and over again. And it's not going to be the fish ate them up. It's going to be what you're supposed to learn from this so that the kid isn't stuck there when they leave. They're not stuck at the fish. They're not stuck at, that part. They're stuck at what's the biblical truth you're supposed to gain from this story.
That big idea work in adult church too. Like, hey, stop talking about how they was blessed. Stop.
Right. What's the big idea here?
Okay, right. God always gonna be blessing. Let's talk about the sacrifice part, huh? That's where you lacking, huh? God is still gonna bless him, but you lacking in the sacrifice, huh? Because I actually I posted, I don't know if y'all saw that post I did about Evangelist Rogers saying that when she first started ministry.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. She would have to go up and down the hotel hallways and look for uneaten food or unfinished food because she just did whatever, God had her do. And if they called and they couldn't pay her much, she couldn't afford, 3 meals or lunch or dinner, she would do that. And so many people were on that life. And she was saying, but, look at me today. You know what I'm saying? She's like, I haven't even finished my food, and I'm headed to the airport. And that's a long way from walking up and down the hall. And people are like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Cause I know God is going to bless me and I'm waiting for God to provide. Or I just applied for a job and I'm waiting for God to come through. I'm like, you didn't hear that. Y'all talk about what God gonna do. God gonna be faithful, consistent. God gonna do what God gonna do in your life. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What you didn't hear was the sacrifice, right? And you didn't hear the humility, and you didn't hear that she was going to go. You know what I mean? If this is what God called me to do, I'm gonna go and think the God. Y'all don't want to hear that part? Okay. So somebody should have I should have given a big idea. You know what I'm saying? And she should have given the big idea because people walk away with whatever they want. And so I think that's good even in adult ministry. So let's get a couple of these questions in here. Somebody talked about mainstream the Christian education across the church. And I never imagined that this is actually a Christian education responsibility, to make sure they're out there finding the curriculum that is consistent for everyone. I'm sure that will help. And I understand, right? The Christian education person is not going to tell the pastor, not in Black church. Okay. The Christian education person, children, nobody's telling the pastor what she or he is going to preach. And I'm not saying that's not, that they should. What I am saying is, if not on Sunday morning, can we all be on one accord in Bible study? You know what I'm saying? Like, at what point can you adjust so that you have these healthy, biblically strong, strong in their faith children who can do the work of the church? My pastor now is my little brother. My pastor is deceased. He died, and his son took over the ministry, and that's my pastor, Chris Wesley now. And I look at the fact that when you look around, like everybody I grew up with is running the church. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like some role in ministry. And of course, my forever first lady is still there and she's still doing ministry. But I also remember the impact she had on us. So it's not like a clash, for people who are older who are still there, because it was such a loving, I used to tell you about this. He's like such a loving experience growing up as a child or a young person at that church. So now we can all do ministry together and the church can literally run intergenerationally.
Yeah.
But that happens because we had a super strong children's ministry. Yeah. Like the best children and youth ministry ever. And so now in his, absence, look at what you've raised. You know what I mean? You've raised people who can not just come up as young people, but can work together intergenerationally. Someone else said someone would have to develop the curriculum. That's true. Someone else, Sister Patton said, I'm an older adult, and you're illustrating things in new ways, such as Linus would be welcomed. All seniors are not limited and close to new ideas and new ways, or even young adult volunteers. I agree with the heavy lifting and continuum through the curriculum. And you're right, Sister Patton, there were a number of people who would stand up and who would come in and be ready to, go to war for you. And I appreciate those people who were just kind of like, girl, I'm not like, let me handle this, and I appreciated those moments. Someone was talking about giving a family packet to study. Y'all give packets though, right, Ree? Don't y'all? Not for families, but you send a packet home?
Yeah, we do it electronically. We would typically on Sunday, the parents would get in an email like a breakdown of what your child learned today.
That's awesome.
So it's just a way for them to, and it had like something like car talk or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. So it was a way you can have this conversation in the car or at the table, and it would help reiterate what those kids were learning.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Somebody said, how common do you think it is for children ministers to meet with parents and their children one-on-one about the questions their children may have that they might not be able to answer? Is that too much for children's pastors?
I don't think it's too much. It's what they're supposed to be doing, meeting the needs of the family. I think a lot of times in church, the wrong children's leader thinks that their audience is only children. But they have to understand the ministry is not just to the child in the classroom, but also to the granny who drops them off, the mama who was supposed to pick them up, the daddy who gets them every other weekend. Like the ministry is to the entire family. I mean, sometimes they forget that I have to make sure I can have a conversation with mothers and with children and not just one or the other.
Yeah, I think that's important. Let's see. Curtis Bryant said it would take a lot of work for a pastor to meet the needs of everyone through preaching. The preaching would be driven by conversations and engagement with everyone in the church. That means pastors should regularly be talking with their children. There's something I do with all of my clients. I encourage them to do when they're talking about intergenerational work. And that is, well, I guess I won't tell you because I do it with my clients.
I gotta pay for that.
Okay. But it is, let me say this, it is to make sure at least once a quarter, everyone comes together, they get on the same page, they're able to ask questions, they're given a vision, everybody's, like put on the same page. And you also get to hear from them enough to be able to meet their needs, if not for what you're doing that quarter, the following quarter. And so you don't have to really shoot in the dark. You don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to miss your target. You can't miss your target because you're meeting the needs of the people who are actually talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that is important. And I think we need to do the heavy lifting of talking to everyone, you know what I mean? Like in your sermon, maybe not in one sermon, but I think the goal is to make sure you're not leaving out the different demographics of the church. We have a couple of
I just wanted to jump in because since Curtis Bryant keeps asking questions, I want to just shout him out real quick. Reverend Dr. Curtis Bryant was a youth pastor when I was a children's pastor at a church. And one of the things that made us so effective is that we would plan together. Even though we were doing different segments of the population, we recognized that it would be more effective ministry-wise if I knew what he was doing with the teens and he knew what I was doing with the little ones. And if there were some times that we could come together, to make it just made planning better. And so I appreciate him. And now that he is a senior pastor, he is bringing that sensitivity to the people that he serves there up in Chicago area. Shout out Chicago. So it just helps, when you have that good working relationship across board. And it's best when you have senior pastor, youth pastor, children's pastor, and if you have a young adult pastor, and everybody is working and planning together. That's when real effective ministry can take place.
Yeah, and I'm sure he's better because he's actually been at the point where he's been able to see both, try to work together, and how hard it is and how important it is. And you know what I mean? Like that I always say, and I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to anyway. It's my brand, right? To say what I want to say. And so I always say you can tell the difference in pastors who did not have to work on staff first.
Amen and ashe. What? One more again? What? Huh? Huge
difference. Huge difference. Pastors who have had to work on staff before. I won't even say the differences because I don't want to hurt no feelings.
Huge.
Period. I mean, the way they handle conflict is better because when you've had to do middle management, which is what being a staff pastor is, right? Then you understand how to talk to people differently. You understand how not to put somebody in that middle management point to make them like a puppet or, like the flunky. So your confrontation is different. Your planning and understanding and the way you do the budget is different. It's a huge difference in so many ways. Like I can spot them out. They never have to tell me.
No. No. It's very easy.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's very only childish.
It is.
It is because they didn't have to work the same. I'm not saying it's even better or worse, right? Because I do know a pastor who did not work as a senior pastor. Who did not work on staff first. But this person is also strong enough to have hot shots who don't have to silence themselves. And so this person doesn't have to have so many blind spots is not politically correct. So many areas that they don't understand. You know what I mean? Like they literally have eyes in places and ears and a heart in places that they wouldn't normally have it. And they don't understand like the system. Right. But yeah, so I think that is something that we should acknowledge. And then somebody said, if the church is going to grow, perhaps positions and or disposition of the pastor may need to change holistically. Post-COVID, and this would be hard, but it's needed. Absolutely. Like,
Yeah. Agreed.
yeah, the pastor getting to make the decisions, all the decisions,
Yeah.
is not the best model. And it's a model we understand. We've all lived under it. I know our context enough to know this, like what that's the pastor said. You know, we've all lived under it at one point or the other, but I just don't know if it is best. And when people say to me a lot, like, well, you know, my pastor just doesn't understand. My pastor can't hear from other people. But when they hire me as the consultant, because they pay so much for it, and I'm affordable though. But they pay so much for it that they do listen. So it's not a listen, it's a value.
It's a value
Appreciation issue.
That's a problem.
It is
it's a big problem. It's a big problem.
But the good thing is I understand that I have their ear first, right? I got the wallet first and then their ear and then their heart. And so they will listen to me even on how they treat the rest of the staff. Like they will end up coming past like, oh, wait, I was going to do this. And I'm thinking that I'm like, no, you know, we got to value them by showing them this, and that. And so it kind of goes together. Nobody calls me in to say, how should I treat my staff, you know, but that kind of goes along with it and what it means to value someone's level of expertise. I have to honestly say too, though, as a consultant, sometimes I say they don't have no expertise. That's why, you know, you're not valuing them because you have them in the wrong place. And so when they say something, you're looking at their work, their actions, and unfortunately, you're not treating them in a way that's valuable because they're not productive or they're not successful. But sometimes you haven't set them up to be successful. And sometimes they should just leave. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just not going to work.
Or you should let them go.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Sleep was nice.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Just let them go.
Please, what are you doing? Like, the people are suffering. The person in the wrong position is suffering.
Yeah, even if they pretend like they're not, they are.
Yeah, so just stop. But I know it's easier said than done for some, so I get it.
It is. It totally is. And I think, you know, when we look at children's ministry, I'm going to say something. No, I don't like it. Let me see. I have not ever been encouraged to go to a white church in my life. Like there's been nothing about a white church I wanted. I didn't want no smoke and dark backgrounds, you know, and no skinny jeans. And, you know, I didn't want none of that and never in my life. But I'm going to tell you, I remember it must have been Brian must have been getting a little older, and we went to this church of the Nazarene church. That's when I think we were at Tanner. Yeah. And my friend Brian Fry was at a Church of Nazarene church. Church of the Nazarene? Maybe they do children's ministry. Do you hear me? It may be like their core. Like their core belief is to like teach children. I've never seen anybody, and I mean it's pretty consistent across the denomination, right? Yeah. And like it was like mind blowing. And I remember Pastor Thomas, who was my pastor at Tanner. We were talking about changing the building. Remember, Jerry Colangelo wanted to buy the building. Yeah, about building a new one, and he wanted us to go like to Disneyland and all these places and see what we could dream up as the best children's ministry ever. And I remember going to the Church of Nazarene, and I was like, oh, I ain't really got to go to Florida.
Yeah.
I just
go down the street around the corner and this here church is killing the game. I remember I had a similar experience. We were going to look at different spaces again to dream up children's area. Mm-hmm. And girl, some of these white churches, I mean, from the check-in process that goes on in the classroom to like the staging area. I mean, when I say mind blown, I'm like, oh, wow. Yeah, that's a different level of investment.
It is.
Level.
It's about the investment. Like, I remember when, I remember being at various churches where I've served and worked. And,
by the way.
Don't you dare.
Okay, never mind.
Don't you dare. Anyway, I remember being sent to conferences, right? You go to the Disney World experience, right? Yeah. And you take all the notes, and you buy all the things there, and then
Oh,
you come home, and you're either told raise a budget, or we don't have the money for that. You know what I'm saying? So it's like we find the money to send. I think that's the setup
yeah.
for some youth and children's workers to be discouraged. So then they abort the mission because you asked me to go to Disney World and come back because we want amazing. We
Yeah.
want a wow. So okay, I go and I tell you, and then they have this check-in system with these iPads and these whatever, but you want to give me a fire book or whatever. No, the check-in system only works with an iPad. But you tell me we can afford some Nooks. Nooks work for books. And it's like
right.
we have a Nook budget, but you just asked me to go, and then I come home and then I write out this elaborate plan for what we can do. Right. And what I see and what I feel. I'm stirred in my spirit. And then I present the plan, and then I'm told we don't have the resources, or it's being pushed to, and then you tell me, well, what can you do with what we have?
Yes. I hate that one. It's like $30,000. Like, okay, I'm gonna give you 3. What you think you can do? And it's literally like that drastic. Like
that drastic. That drastic from 40,000 to 3.
What you can do with 3? Not what can you do? What you can do with 3?
What can you do with 3?
Like I said 30. Like, are you kidding me right now? And I'm like, can we at least have a 10-year plan to get that? Because after this 3,000, we ain't gonna get another 3,000. It's just like crazy though.
Yeah, and you get discouraged and you don't want to do it. So you stop wanting to dream, and you stop wanting to, think outside of the, because in the African American church, we're real good for saying, because we want y'all to think outside of the box in this children and youth ministry. Give us some out the box money. But you go to the white church and they're spending the money there. You can tell because they got walls and they got all
oh my gosh, you ain't gonna see no white wall. Okay,
no,
like that's gonna be a whole forest. Okay,
right.
And then I remember I was tired of ducking going through them doors, and I was like, why? Why? And they're like, oh, this space is for them.
It's for them. Right.
You come in there if you're comfortable, fine, but it's not for you. And so, yes, the doors are lower. And I'm just like, I'm sure I don't have to duck anywhere I go. Like, it's just like, why do I have to keep standing this long? Because this is for them. So Tori Marshall asked, are we now talking about a cultural phenomenon when we compare white churches and black churches' approach to children's ministry? Have black churches been historically more comprehensive, like everyone in the same room in their approach? And I would say, yes, even if they're not all in the same room. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, right. They budget, the majority of it is going to go to.
I think we put in the black church, we typically put the priority in one room. We may allow for, and it's not every, but when you think of the whole group, we may allow for there to be some emphasis in other spaces, but the big space that we're going to put the priority is that room, that other room.
Yeah, I agree.
The big church room.
I agree. Somebody was saying pretty much that they stopped, because it was hard to be the only one with the vision. You know what I'm saying? You have the burden of that vision. And I know how that, we all know how that feels. And so I pray you find space where, the vision is aligned and funded and appreciated and valued. So the last question before we depart from each other is, what do y'all think about children in big church? Does it big church? And I hate big church when they say it like that. But does that? Okay, I'll answer that question too. I'll answer that question. Let me ask this one, and then we're gonna get one more. Does the big church, little church? Should children actually go to adult church to teach them how to respond in church, or is there no reason to practice? Church. I'll say this: when we were raising Breon, we didn't have snacks in church. Like you're just gonna go in here, you're gonna say, I'm a grandma now. Baby, I have snacks. I'm like, if I can't bring no snacks, I can't bring my child. Cause this one, he different. This is 20-some year, gap, and some change. And the strength I used to have, you know what I mean, to like keep, them together and just act them right. And no, you don't need all that. I ain't got that kind of strength. I'm older. I don't got that kind of strength or patience, and I'm not the primary caregiver either, So when I come in, if he's used to snacking all day, if you want us to be able to sit here for this time, he got that some snacks. So real quick before we talk about big church, little church, or whatever, Tori asked a follow-up question: is that a strength for Black churches to lean into the comprehensive I don't think so. No, because here's the problem, and I want y'all to respond to, like, even when you go to the doctor, there's a pediatrician before, you're old enough to go to, the regular PC. Like, everyone else seems to understand the need. When you go to school, I mean, y'all stay in school together until you're what, in sixth grade or something like that. And then there's a need to break out and do different things. Like, I think it's very necessary that we do cater to the life stages that are naturally happening to people. And I think that's the only way you do it, and you actually build something strong in each life stage. There's no way we're gonna all grow together in one room. I just don't see that ever happening well. But what y'all think?
Agreed.
I
Okay.
agree.
Okay.
The needs are different.
Very
And then if you push a little further, sometimes they become a safety issue. Having everybody in the same room is not good, conducive for growing and learning, and it's not even safe all the time.
I agree. And we often talk about church as a hospital. All hospitals have different floors. They're treating people differently because of their different needs and trauma and all the stuff that they've come in. So somebody said not even like once a month to bring the kids in. So what say you about big church, little church, children's church, mini church?
Cherie, you take it.
I think it's important that children experience the church. One, so that they understand, and I think it's important they understand why we do certain things. Especially, let's say, for instance, like I didn't grow up Baptist, but when you look at a traditional Baptist church, you want that child who leaves the church to understand why we do the things that we do, why certain things are sacred. So I think it's important. I think it helps sometimes church morale when they can see that these kids are not forgotten about, that we either bring them in or we allow them to be a part of the service and they grow. It helps build confidence. I think there are a lot of things that can happen to enrich the life of the church if we include the church together at different points. I don't think it has to be every week, but I think there should be an opportunity for the little kids to come to big church. I hate that too. And not just for display and not just for the Christmas cantata and not just for the dance with the dads, not just for that, but for actual letting them read scripture, letting them, stand on a stool to proclaim, do something. I think it's important that they see that and that they be a part of that. Real quickly, when we had this really booming youth ministry and we used to bring in a DJ and we had everything, right? So it was 6th through 12th grade and middle school, high school. And I mean, we had the best youth ministry in Houston, Texas. I don't care what nobody says. But when our kids started going to college, they were so disconnected to big church. When they went to college and on the campus of a college, when they went to BSM or whatever, it looked nothing like what we were giving them for 4 years, 8 years. So a lot of them disconnected. Because they went looking for that experience. They couldn't find it. And so they were like coming back home and they come home for the house. No, I ain't been going to church because I can't find anything. And we realized after a while, we were doing our kids a disservice because we made it a whole party. Like we had the lights before lights was popping in youth ministry. We was doing it. Like we had it all. And then our kids, we did our kids a disservice because they were disconnecting from their faith when they went to college because nothing looked like that.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Probably need some kind of balance in that area. I get it. Keish, what you say?
Well, I'm a children's pastor at heart, always will be. So for me, the last church that I worked for, I think it was a really beautiful balance of incorporating times when the kids were in their area versus when families worship together. And so like our communion Sunday, everybody was in church together. We didn't have separate children programming. We didn't have separate youth programming. Everybody's in there. And for me, the sign of a healthy church is when you can hear babies and you can hear toddlers. Like if you don't hear that, that's a problem. Like your church ain't healthy and growing. Like you need them in there. And so, from the time I was a young mom and Amaya would come up in the pulpit and I would hold her while I'm doing a benediction. When I was pastoring, I wanted the kids to be comfortable in that space and feel included in that space and not really feeling like, they always had to kind of be separated. And I think there's something about families worshiping together. I think that is, that's something really beautiful. And I think it does teach our babies something. And I will say, once upon a time when I was a children's pastor, I had read an article about this church of another culture that had created like this little toddler area in their sanctuary where, because some babies, when they're in your lap and they're in your arms, they sit still. But once they hit like 2, they want that life. They want to be up and moving. And so this church created this really beautiful space in front of the sanctuary. And Black church don't even like that already, but it was in front. And it just had a lot of like little stuff that the kids could do so that the parents could sit up there and the kids didn't have to sit in the pews and they just could be like doing their thing. Girl, my senior pastor was like, okay, that sounds real cute, but what we not about to do?
I actually love it.
Now, what we're not doing is that. But like I saw the beauty of that because, they had interviewed families of the church and people who didn't have small kids. And they were like, the kids weren't distracting because people automatically assume if you have these kids around that it's going to distract from the worship, but it actually added to the worship experience. And the parents ain't got to worry about trying to lock them down, and enjoy worship because they can be moving. So I love that. And I'm going to keep that dream in my head.
Listen, one of my clients going to take that idea. Like, I'm going to keep shopping it until somebody says yes. Okay. Like in real life, I do that sometimes for real. But like, I can only imagine, like I tell people on my worst days, I live behind a school, elementary school. And I remember when I was working for the church, I never knew that this happened because I was always at work. Yeah. And when I started my company, I would be home and I'd be like, Mom, do you hear that? Do you hear that? She's like, yeah, that's the kids across the street laughing and playing. And now on my worst days, I go to the kitchen where, because it's right against the backyard. And I go and wait to hear the kids like laughing and playing and all that stuff because it really fuels me. And one thing, let me tell you, one thing I know for sure is that if you want me to cry before I preach, you put them children up there.
Baby sing. What? Girl.
And I mean, I will be like undone. Like I heard these kids and my friend Anthony was installed. I don't know if you remember, were you there on Sunday, Ree? Or
no, we can't. No, we were there Sunday. We were there.
So do you remember when them cheering, saying, "Order my steps"? I said, Lord Jesus. Cause I believe God hears you, and when you say order my steps at 4, God remembering that at 40. Hello, somebody. I deep down in my heart, I am the person I am of faith today. I'm an intercessor today because of who I was as a child and what I learned as a child. And when I was a child and they told me, oh, you're an intercessor, like nobody said, well, when you get older, you're going to be an intercessor. You know what I mean? Like nobody treated me like that. So when I heard them cheering, singing, order my steps, I said, oh, Lord, this is what they need.
And she shouted that Sunday too.
Like I did, because let me tell you, I'm getting emotional right now. I don't want to cry. But I feel like you don't know you need to pray that prayer when you're that age, but you better know that it'll keep you, know. Man, so like when you talk about bringing them into church, keep them out when I preach, because if they do anything, they can be like, "Oh, I just don't know." Like,
listen. When I see the little babies, because I got some of my little babies, like my folk with the little, and they be waving their little hand while I'm preaching. Baby, listen. I don't care about no adult saying amen.
I know.
If I get a baby
saying amen.
And if they repeat what I say, and the parents are dying, like they are like, "Oh my God, my child's being loud." No. That baby just said what I said. So that right there.
Yeah.
Listen, a little bit, because we would do a benediction. I would say Ubuntu every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Girl, this little 3-year-old looked at me and she was like, Ubuntu, what?
I was trying to tell you. Nothing like it. Like, that's the mark. Like when the child comes up and says, "Ooh, I like your preach. I like your preach." Like this one little girl, Trinity White. I'll never forget that friendship. But she gave me this piece of paper that she doodled while I was preaching, and it was a girl preacher, and she said, "Preach, girl." Baby, still got it.
You over. It's
Listen,
over.
Trinity White can need to go to college and need some tuition today, and she could call me because like that's everything. And these little twins would be like, mommy, there's the girl preacher. Like, you know, like it's that, or like one girl dressed like me and like did her fake Reverend Bree sermons, and she said, because, you know, and I was just like, no, I don't want to say that. But to know that they care or they hear or
Yep.
You can like flunk in front of adults and a child tell you something that you said.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, this wasn't for y'all then, I guess. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
Makes it all worth it in a total different way. Like it was worth it.
Yep. Or you can have a child like mine who at 4, I'm preaching. She on the front row because I was a guest preacher at the church. So they were shooting by the deacons. And I'm doing my good preaching. Mm-hmm. And I looked down and that baby had pulled out a lint roller from her purse that I didn't know she had and was rolling lint off of her tights. That's when the kids need to be out the church. See that right there? That's when you need to go.
She said, but that last point reminded me that, you know, I need to be always ready. And a little bit of lint, I ain't ready.
Roll it, girl. Roll it. I got lint on my tights. I need to get it off.
Right. She was like, this is not excellent. You said excellence. As a matter of fact, I'm not dressed well. I got to fix this. I got to be a better representative. She was like, you know, she was like, she's almost done. She's probably going to ask me to stand up. Let me get right.
She was getting ready. She was getting ready for it.
She didn't want to embarrass you.
No. Come get her, Bree. Come get her.
And everybody know that's my baby.
That's your baby.
That is my baby. Okay, thank y'all. Listen, so much. It's been good. I knew it'd be easy because I love both of y'all. And, you know, we have normal, regular conversations on a regular basis. So I knew this would be easy. But, you know, y'all could have been my friends and not great at what you've done. So, and we would have talked on the phone and not on this here live, huh? But because you guys are amazing at what you do, I knew that the people would benefit from talking to you. And so maybe what we'll do is when we have the State of the Black Church study come out, we'll have a conversation around children, youth, and young adult. Because I think you've done children, youth. Have you done young adult?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so maybe we'll talk about like intergenerational work or something, and we'll do a whole like a big conversation. I'm kind of considering something a little bigger for us to reveal this data, but I'm definitely going to bring y'all in so y'all can help us think through what that looks like. And I think we should go ahead and get together and create this intergenerational curriculum that I think the church needs. So,
yep,
absolutely.
I think it would be good. I think it would be good. And I think, you know, y'all are both high performers, which means we could get it done quickly. Because in this world, you move quickly or you don't move at all, you know? So, and I think that's probably what kind of like holds us up, you know, from doing things like creating curriculum and stuff like that. It's not that we don't know how, because we pretty much create curriculum when we buy curriculum from white organizations, and then we do all this work to it. And at that point, they should be paying us instead of us paying them for the curriculum because we put so many hours into it. Right. So I really feel good about that. But thank y'all so much. I encourage y'all, absolutely. I encourage y'all to follow my friends because they're great. I encourage y'all to follow them, to engage their ministry, and then to holler at us at our webinar later this month. I think it's I'm sure it's the last Tuesday in the month. It's the Building Blocks of Children's Ministry, where we're going to go over children's ministry trends, data that will help to inform what we do in children's ministry. You know, I'm no scammer. I don't do children's ministry, but what I do is data, and I understand trends. And so we're going to talk from that area, the systems that are like best practices in children's ministry. And who knows, maybe you'll see one of my friends there with me that day because I think I need them. And so thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and share this after it's over. Tag somebody to go ahead and watch the replay. We really get really good through plays. I think we got like over 1,000 through plays in the last one we did. And so go ahead and show people because it's totally worth it. And I'm sure you and your ministry and your family will be blessed by this. Thank you again. We'll see you the first Tuesday of, no, we won't because it's 4th of July. We'll see the second Tuesday of next month, and we'll be right back at it again. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Absolutely. Thank y'all.